My name is Wisdom Komlan Mesan. I'm the Deputy Controller and Accountant General in charge of payroll management. What guides the management of the payroll is essentially derived from the Public Financial Management Act. The Act says that it's the responsibility of the Controller and Accountant General to prepare the salary of public servants. The Act also acknowledges the fact that there are times where some institutions run their own independent payroll, like the universities. But the Act says that they can continue running those payroll until such a time that the Controller and Accountant General will roll them onto the mechanized payroll. And so what we are doing right now, as you mentioned, concerning the migration of the university, is consistent with the Act. The Act further states that even in the time that independent payrolls are run by institutions, to the extent that they subsist on the national budget, the system which they are using to prepare those payroll must be approved by the Controller and Accountant General. And so the migration of the universities has been agreed upon. Contact and communication have taken place between the ministry, the Ghana Education Service, the university vice chancellors. We have had meetings and discussions with them. We have drawn a roadmap for the migration. From the controller's end, there is the need for us to have, first of all, a base data that include all the staffs on the university's payroll and their personnel related information that we need to put into the system. That base data has been collected from almost all the universities. We have validated them. The next stage where we are now is to get in the consultant that will support the Controller and Accountant General to implement the migration. There is a system configuration work which the consultant has to do. As I speak to you right now, the consultant is at the department with his team, and they have begun the process of configuration. Once that is completed, the payroll for the universities will be run.
You have
like you say, like like I said, once the payroll is run, because it is the first time that the universities are to be paid through the mechanized payroll, due diligence is critical. Because you don't want to have a situation where somebody from the university will say that I was taking X amount when I was on the university payroll, and then when the migration was done, I took less. So that process, validation, reconciliation, will be done thoroughly until we finally pay. But back to the question as to when do we intend to have this done? It's a process. We intend to have one or two of such universities completed hopefully by the end of September or early October. And then the others, based upon the validation and the reconciliation that we conduct, we will be rolling them out gradually. We are targeting at the 9 public universities so that they can all come onto the government payroll. It's to their advantage, because we have heard from some vice chancellors about the challenge they go through in looking for loan to pay university staff because subvention have delayed. If we go by the payroll timetable, which we have for the other public servants, we pay them sometimes way ahead of the time that the university subventions are given to them. So apart from the staff being paid on time, the other incidental cost of borrowing to be able to take care of the university's personnel costs before government subvention comes in, those things could be avoided. The running of the payroll is a responsibility for the employer and also the controller and accountant general and all other stakeholders in the chain of preparing and paying salary. Controller has the responsibility of receiving the input that the institution feed into the payroll system, validate them and run them to produce the salary. But the institutions also have their job to do, and their role is to make sure that their input which they are putting into the system are correct, they are accurate, so that the controller doesn't run a payroll that is loaded with error. There are what we call in accounting internal control system. There are processes that tries to make sure that mistakes are minimized, errors are avoided, and people who have intention to abuse the system don't do so easily. And so one of such control system which we implemented some years back, about 6 years ago, is what we call the electronic salary payment voucher system. The payment voucher system is a system by which, after the institution fed the payroll system with input and we run the payroll, we get a test report which is given back to the institution. In the past, that report was like a manual report that we gave to them, but we upgraded it into an electronic system where the test report is sent electronically to the institution, specifically their human resource managers, and also the management unit head under which the various staff work. They are supposed to look at the test report against the input which they fed the system with and give controller a feedback as to whether the result that they obtained was correct or not. Now, we did this system and implemented it about 6 years ago, but we realized that there were some people who were not complying strictly to the instruction that we gave out when we implemented the system. And so this workshop, essentially, considering the importance of this validation process, is to bring back the attention of validators to the important principles and to make sure that they carry out the validation before the salaries are run.
Which were the principles?
The principle was that anybody who will undertake the validation needs to have been defined on the system, given an identity number with a password. And it is with that password that that person can log into the system and carry out the validation. We observe that there are instances where people go on retirement, and instead of information to be submitted to us and new people defined on the system, the person who is on retirement password is used by another person that has not been defined, and then they carry on the validation. It is also expected that when you carry out the validation, you give unambiguous information as to people who are supposed to be terminated and people who are supposed to be suspended. If it has to do with termination, it must be the case that that person is not likely to come back to the payroll system. When you give information that the person is dead, that's termination. When you give the information that the person has retired, that is termination. So if we terminate such a person and you come back and suggest that we should reactivate the person, it disturbed the business process. because the logic is not consistent with the process. And so we have situations where people are using other people's password, and we also have in situations where the information feedback from the process was not totally helpful in achieving the results. So in addition to the ESPV validation, we thought that it is also an opportunity for us to educate stakeholders about their responsibility in managing the payroll. And so here we are talking to them about the input forms that they need to complete for various activities that needs to be carried out on the payroll. New entrants have their own input form. If you want to do promotion, there is an input form that you have to comply with. If you are doing reactivation, there are input forms that you are supposed to comply with. And so we are bringing those things to their attention. We are also trying to help them to know that there is a result of their input which they submit into the system. So we generate transaction report for the input that they provide and how those transactions affect the ultimate salary of the employees. And so in the electronic payment voucher which we send to the validators, they are supposed to have their own input form by their side and see how that input which they made eventually affected the salary of the employees. It is at that point that they will be able to tell that this salary which Mr. A is earning is reasonable. This salary is out of the range. And so they can draw our attention for correction.